high. So, worst moments of 2018, in your opinion, Nick?
Well, for me, the worst moment, happened before the tournament even started. No Italy in the World Cup. For me, that's I get it. It's not the team from '06. They weren't the greatest team in the world, but to not even make it, that's
they lost to Sweden in the qualification.
That's a disgrace. Like Sweden, that team stinks. Like I don't care if you have Zlatan. They
didn't even have Zlatan.
They didn't even have Zlatan. I think to show how much I remember. Probably John Guidotti was leading the line, and that guy's terrible.
Oh, the guy from Celtic?
Yeah. So he, the fact that they could not make it, for me, that's obviously the worst. Honorable mention, France winning. I'm not a fan of the French national team, so that's an honorable mention, especially the fact that they denied a true dog from winning the tournament, which it's kind of nice to see a dog win a tournament because that doesn't happen that often. Especially at the World Cup, that doesn't really happen. So yeah, Italy not even making it is my worst of 2018.
Yeah. So Oscar, as a Mexico fan as you are, I'm sure 2018 had lots of ups and downs for you, but starting off with the worst, what do you think was
actually
worst?
My worst is not related to Mexico, like my top one. Actually, my top one is actually Spain's manager getting fired a few days prior. Because when you mentioned it happened a little bit prior to the World Cup, when you were talking about Italy, it made me think of that, like Joan Laporta getting fired and then being replaced. Like that was such a scandal.
Yeah.
Joan Laporta, he's the president of Barcelona.
He's the president of Barcelona. Yeah,
it all sounds similar, but yeah, no, that to me was wild. I mean, for Fernando Hierro, I thought being very strong center back in the past and working with the Spanish team for a long time, I thought he would do well. It didn't really pan out. From Mexico's point of view, having Juan Carlos Osorio stay to manage the World Cup to me was an absolute disaster. We didn't bring the right team. The only game we ever played well was against Germany. It just kind of went downhill from there. And then to find out that it wasn't the top German side that you're used to, you couldn't even compare that side to the side we faced 1 year prior for the Confederations Cup. They thrashed us 4-1 because then they didn't even get out the group stage. And on your point about Sweden, though, they did get out the group stage. So imagine if Mexico had been in a group with Germany, Italy, and South Korea. That would have been cool to see. I don't think that's how they would have panned out when you sort out the groups, but I would have liked to see that.
Yeah. For me, I mean, I think that like I said before, there's no such thing as a bad World Cup. But I do think 2018 had some low moments and some things about it I did not like. For one, as an American, as a fan of the U.S. national team, didn't make the World Cup in humiliating fashion. We lost to Trinidad and Tobago, and then didn't even get to the plane to go to Russia. To be fair, if we had qualified in place of Panama, I don't think that the U.S. would have done anything because we would have been in a group with Tunisia, who we could easily beat, but Belgium and England. Both, if you take the 2017 U.S. team and then put them up against Belgium and England, we're losing both of those games 4-0. So, but I would say just the amount of good teams that just didn't make the World Cup was crazy. I mean, you mentioned Italy. Obviously, they won the World Cup 4 times and they didn't make this one. Chile, they were back-to-back champions of the Copa America and they failed to qualify. And then you also had, teams that not necessarily you'd expect them to win the World Cup or anything like that, but they were consistently there. Ghana, they've been at the past 3 World Cups. They were pretty good at the last 3. They didn't do anything, or they didn't qualify. Cameroon were the reigning champions of Africa. They didn't qualify. Algeria, who won the Africa Cup of Nations the year after the World Cup, they didn't qualify either. So there was a bunch of teams that didn't qualify, and there's more I can name. There's a bunch of teams that just didn't qualify there, and it was really, really disappointing to see that. Another thing that I would say was disappointing was all the big teams at the 2018 World Cup were subpar, and I've said this numerous times on this channel before. This is my thesis of the 2018 World Cup. All the big teams played bad, including France. France, in my opinion, most overrated world champion that I've ever seen, or that I've read about or heard about.
Yeah.
You can just go through each one. Like, okay, you mentioned Spain. They were doing perfect up until the World Cup. They sacked Lopetegui. Granted, it was partly his fault for agreeing to deal with Real Madrid. It was also Real Madrid's fault, but still.
I would have done it too if I were him. I would have said yes to Real Madrid.
Yeah, but Real Madrid, they shouldn't have announced it right before the World Cup. But at the same time, like Spain, that was disrespectful. Do you really want to sack your manager 2 days before your opening match?
Yeah.
Who else? Portugal, reigning European champions. Ronaldo had a great tournament, but the rest of the team just did nothing. They were very disappointing. Brazil, they got to the quarterfinals, yes, but they probably should have won the World Cup. Their team was very good. Argentina and Germany, both train wrecks, of course. Even England, yes, they made fourth place. Great success. Great for them, but they were on a favorable side of the brackets.
Oh, their route was extremely favorable.
Yeah. And then Belgium, who they were in a group with, again, third place. Not bad for a country like Belgium in hindsight, but you just look at that squad and you're like, they really should have won the World Cup. They should have played better than they did. They didn't play to their potential. They almost lost to Japan. They struggled against Brazil as well. And then, France. They got outplayed by Croatia in the final. They parked a bus against Belgium. Yes, they played good against Uruguay, but Uruguay didn't have Cavani. They almost lost to Argentina. That trash Argentina side, they were losing at one point. And then in the group stage, they struggled against Australia, Denmark. They just weren't that good of a team. Now, granted, they won the World Cup. They did what they needed to do. Their names are on the trophy forever. But still, you compare it to 2014 Germany, 2010 Spain, 2006 Italy, 2002 Brazil. I don't think they're comparable. So,
I mean, if you want to trace that back to one of your, last couple of videos, if Croatia was still part of Yugoslavia, though, I think that team was just more well-rounded, would have trounced France.
Oh,
yeah. If they were, the politics aside, they were allowed to incorporate those players. You could have played that France team off the park.
Yeah, shout out to the previous video on the Football Bloc team. Nick, what was, in your opinion, the best or some of the best moments of the 2018 World Cup in Russia?
Well, I think for me, clearly the best run was the Croatian run to the final. I didn't really have a horse in the race, so I was actively pulling for whatever dog could get as far as possible. And Croatia, they gave it absolutely everything that they had. Was it Subasic, the goalie? He was playing with his hamstring torn completely off the bone or something on. He was dying for his country out there. You had the Vida, you had Modric, you had Mandzukic. They were all giving laying everything on the line for Croatia. I mean, their squad, not the deepest. I mean, they only could rely on 3 guys coming off the bench, and against France, France, that's not going to cut it. So it was an uphill battle, and they also they kept going extra time as well. So they were playing so much more football than France. So it's really unfortunate that they couldn't win it. I guess second honorable mention is the home cooking for Russia. The fact that they were able to do so well. I think it was cool to see because nobody ever thinks, oh, Russia, what a footballing power. They had the run at the 2008 Euros. And that was cool for them. But I mean, really, in the interim, they had nothing, and they played very well. It was the Mario Fernandez, the proud Russian hero. Really established himself in that. So I think that's probably the honorable mention. But the Croatian run was very special at that tournament.
My favorite moment, actually, you're probably not going to believe this, is seeing Panama score their first World Cup goal at their first World Cup. Because in my opinion, Panama's team was nowhere near World Cup quality. Right? It wasn't.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
They didn't deserve it. Well, okay, they earned their place, but you compare their squad was nowhere near.
Yeah, and they were only there because the U.S. tripped up.
Yeah.
Now, they qualified in the CONCACAF playoff spot, and that's actually kind of hard to do because you got to face off against the top team from Oceania. Now, the U.S. would have cruised by, but for Panama, that's really hard. And in my opinion, Panama had the most exciting and the best coach in CONCACAF during that World Cup cycle, and Nandario Gomez, because he took Ecuador to their first World Cup in 2002. So I thought it was just a great story to see. And their first goal came from a center back that played in Mexico. It was
Felipe
Beloy.
Okay.
Beloy.
Yeah.
And it was, again, like the whole connection there. Mexico's performance, no, I don't want to speak on that part. I'm gonna stick with Panama as my CONCACAF representative. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I think for me the best moment, I would say I think you can classify 2018 as the World Cup of the underdogs, because you had Croatia make the final and, in my opinion, outplay France in the final and should have won. That would have been so cool to see Croatia win. But regardless, second place, that's still insane. You also saw Russia, the host nation. It's always nice to see the host nation do well. They got to the quarterfinals, and they played well. Cheryshev and Akinfeev, all these guys, Zuba, they all played really well. That's probably the best they'll ever play in their careers. I mean, Akinfeev is good, but like Zuba and Cheryshev, like they were average players beforehand, and they went back to being average players now. Other teams like Sweden made it to the quarterfinals. Granted, they weren't that strong of a team, but still, quarterfinals is pretty good for them. I thought Switzerland was a strong, solid team. And then here and there, like teams that didn't say qualify for the knockout stages, they still had some good performances. Like South Korea, they beat Germany. Like that was a momentous achievement for South Korea, even though they didn't get through the group stage, and then even though there was a very poor German side, still beating Germany is a big achievement. And then teams like Iran and Morocco, neither of them made it through to the knockout stage, but they were so close, both of them. They really took it to Spain and Portugal, and any other group they would have made it through. I would say my number one moment, my favorite moment though, is the Argentina versus Nigeria game. Now, I talked to you about this before, but that was my favorite game of the tournament, just because it was a complete roller coaster of emotions. Like first, I was rooting for Argentina because of Messi. They were winning. Messi scored a great goal, and it was like, all the troubles of the last two games, they're over. Argentina's on the right path now. Second half comes around, Victor Moses scores a penalty, and then like Argentina needed to win. So if they tied, they were out. And I was on the verge of tears because I was like, bro, I was so invested in it. I was like, Messi's not going to make it to the knockout stage. And then out of nowhere, Marcus Rojo, who's playing center back, comes up and scores a volley right outside the 18. Amazing goal, and then Argentina through to the knockout stage. Yes, they got beat by France, but still, that was probably my favorite moment of the World Cup. All right, so